Okay, welcome back. Hey, what a delight to have back with us. It's been a long time since we've had David Barton on the air with us, but what a delight to have him back with us. He heads up Wall Builders. You may want to go to wallbuilders.com. It really is a terrific website and an incredible resource for you in so many ways. We want to talk to David today a little bit about a book that ended up being quite the controversy, and that is The Jefferson Lies. And David, good to see you again, my friend. How are you?
Hey, great to be back with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. Your book, Jefferson Lies, kind of got pushed around a little bit. What was the controversy?
Well, it did really well. Went out at New York Times bestseller, and then a half a dozen professors came out and said, oh, no, Jefferson's not like that. He was definitely a secularist, and he was definitely anti-religion. He was definitely anti-Christian. And, of course, now what you see behind me, I'm sitting in a museum library. We have 100,000 documents from before 1812. And so I have thousands of Jefferson's original writings and Washington and Adams and all those guys, thousands of things after that as well. And so what we had done was we said, you know, the way Jefferson is portrayed today is not accurate. Jefferson was not a secularist. I mean, he's the guy who started church in the U.S. Capitol. And he's the guy that by 1854, the largest church in the United States was the one that he helped start in the Capitol. And we have actual sermons that were preached in that church. And Jefferson went to that church 8 years as president. And we look over and say, well, when he started the public schools of Washington, D.C., he was on the Board of Education. He authored the plan of education. He put the Bible in schools as the primary reading text. And so we came out with stuff like that, and these half dozen academics said, oh, no, no, no. And so it scared the publisher, and the publisher pulled the book while it was in the middle of doing really well. So now another publisher has brought it out. It's back again. We have actually a lot more documentation because it allowed us to say, you know, here's what the 6 critics said. Here's why they're dead wrong, even more. So it's got a lot of fun information that really is contradictory to what most people today think about Jefferson.
Well, you know, I have to tell you, David, when I was chairman of the Oregon Republican Party for 4 years, many times I had visited the Jefferson Memorial, which I think is one of the great memorials on the mall. And I quoted a lot of the writings that are there, especially what's written around the brim there of the dome. And first thing that comes back to me, you know, you shouldn't really be quoting that because he was a deist. He was just doing that to be convenient. What would be your response?
Exactly. I mean, here's Jefferson with 100 volumes of political writings. And the Jefferson Memorial, they go through and take out his very most poignant, his best quotes. And so you have those 4 tableaus on the wall, and then you have the one around the top that you were mentioning. 4 of the 5 are absolutely God-centered. Now, when 80% of the political rhetoric of your least religious founding father is God-centered, that kind of says something. And there's no question. One of the fun things I have at universities elsewhere is I go through Jefferson's actions on religion, and he's a whole lot more active than what we would even consider many, many evangelicals and Christians today. Matter of fact, he used federal funds to send missionaries to the Indians, to evangelize the Indians, to build them a church. You know, even I would be uncomfortable with using federal funds to promote the gospel, but Jefferson did that. And so that's so out of character for what we hear. And the other thing that's cool in the Jefferson Memorial is when you look at those quotes, some of that God-centered quotes, I actually have his book, don't have it here on stage with me, but 1781 is the first book he did. And he has a long chapter in there about how terrible slavery is, and God's not going to allow it to exist, and he will judge the nation if we don't get rid of slavery. We go, wait a minute, Jefferson was a slave owner. What's he doing? And as it turns out, he was a slave owner. Virginia would not allow him to free his own slaves. And he became a national voice for abolition. The Democrats right now are running from him because they say, oh, he's a slave owner, terrible guy. Here, actually, this is the first black man to speak in Congress. His name is Henry Highland Garnett. This is a sermon he gave in Congress, 2 hours. And here's this black activist saying, Jefferson would be thrilled. We finally abolished slavery this week. And so you have black civil rights leaders who praise Jefferson. Here's Frederick Douglass. He's praising Jefferson. He said, I learned that all men were equal from Jefferson. Here's a white abolitionist, John Quincy Adams, praising Jefferson. And so historically, Jefferson was seen as this vast voice trying to end slavery, even though he couldn't free his own slaves. And today we say, oh, you can't listen to anything Jefferson says. Why, he was a slave owner. No, that's a whole different situation from what was actually going on.
So where did the criticism come from? Where does the pushback come from?
Well, the pushback is pretty simple because when you look at the pushback, it goes back to a tactic that we see even used with Jesus. Jesus has this big following. The opposition doesn't like the big following, doesn't like the new teachings. Jesus is God, so they say, this man's a wine bibber and a glutton. And if you attack his character, you try to peel off the followers. And so what's happened now is if we can go after founding fathers like, let's say we don't like the ideas of Jefferson, because Jefferson, by the way, is the guy who sent the first military troops in to fight the war on terror. He did not believe Islam was a religion of peace. He actually believed it was forced, and he didn't believe you defeated Islam by drawback. He said you have to have a surge if you're going to defeat radical Islam. He's clear on that. He's clear on LGBT issues of all things. He is exceptionally clear on religious liberty and the rights of conscience. We have 9 cases of the U.S. Supreme Court this term on the rights of conscience. Jefferson was unequivocal. You have to protect the rights of conscience more than any other right. He was very clear on not going into debt. He was very clear on no gun control. Matter of fact, he advised 15-year-old kids to learn to use a gun and carry it with them wherever they went. I mean, if you're in the situation where Jefferson is opposed to everything you're trying to move forward, what you want to do is get Jefferson's voice out of the arena, and you say, oh, he's a slave owner. He was an atheist, agnostic, deist. Oh, he wrote his own Bible and cut out everything he disagreed. And so that's supposed to contaminate him so that none of us want to listen to what he said. We won't even investigate what he said. And that's why we brought out the Jefferson Lies book to say, no, this is a voice that needs to be heard, and what we're being told today about him is not accurate. By the way, here's what he actually said, and it really speaks to the culture today.
Beautifully said. So, where does it go from here? How do you get Jefferson back into the public schools?
You know, it's interesting that while the Democrats are running from it as fast as they can, and they're taking them out, they have an annual fundraiser every year, the Jefferson-Jackson Day dinner. They're dropping him. We're saying, hey, conservatives, pick him up, because here's a civil rights guy. Here's an abolitionist guy. By the way, here's a guy on limited government. Here's a guy on health care. He said that's a state issue, not a federal issue. On immigration, state issue, not a federal. I mean, all these things we fight about today, here's a voice that has clarity on it. And by the way, the principles he gave us have caused us to be the most successful nation in the history of the world. He's a good guy to get back into our rhetoric. So we're kind of pushing him out there for people who really do have the tendency for traditional American values. He's the guy.
David, I know you spent your life defending the faith of our founding fathers, and yet in case after case is being ignored. Do you think America is now on the verge? I think Wallace Henley talks about we have a time of repentance, and then we have a time of remembrance where we go back and remember who we were and bring that forward. Do you think we're kind of there?
I do. I think we are at a time of remembrance. I think there's a lot going on now that is very interesting. For me, like the book, when we brought out the Jefferson Lies, New York Times bestseller. But look at other New York Times bestseller. Glenn Beck's book on George Washington, Newt Gingrich's book on 1776 and on Trenton. You have McCullough's book on John Adams. I mean, people are willing to pay good money to learn what they should have learned in school. And the fact that these are New York Times bestsellers at the top of their stride, and people are willing to pay money for that, I think is a terrific thing. And I think that is part of a revival. Biblically, Josiah trying to get the nation back to God, they found the old scrolls and they go, my gosh, we used to be like this. Going back to their history led to an even greater national revival. And I'm seeing that now. I'm seeing people want to know more about history and want to rediscover it and find that, you know, there really is nothing new under the sun. They dealt with issues we deal with. They have solutions. So I'm seeing that tendency. I think Wallace is exactly right. I love his work. And I think Wallace is right. We're back to that time of remembering.
All right, now we're in the heat of a political campaign, as you well know, and I'm sure you've been asked to be all over the place. But
yeah.
do you sense and hear or feel that a biblical worldview is in this campaign, or is it just being touted as something that we ought to think about?
No, it's being touted as something we ought to think about, but it's definitely in the campaign. And I say that because I know personally a number of these candidates. I've worked with them for a number of years. And in the case of Ted Cruz, I worked with him before he ever thought about political office. And here's a guy that, I mean, memorized the Constitution word for word when he was 12, 13 years old, has got the Bible down pat, but he's argued 9 cases of the U.S. Supreme Court that deal with religious liberties. And he wasn't doing that to pander to any base. He went to bat for the 10 Commandments in public. He went to bat for the veterans being able to have a cross in the Mojave Desert. He went to bat for keeping under God in the Pledge of Allegiance. No reason to do that except he's convicted that that's the right thing to do. And so he has made his campaign unequivocally reaching out to Christians. Marco Rubio has done the same. Ben Carson's done the same. That's who these guys genuinely are. So it's not pandering in any way. And again, I know these guys, and so this is their heart. And it's really refreshing to see that and to see that openness about faith. No hesitancy in talking about Jesus Christ on the campaign trail. No hesitancy in talking about the Bible from those guys. And I think that's really good.
All right, let me just ask you something that may seem political. I don't mean it to be, because I think it's very historical. We seem to be in a constitutional crisis with a president who is legislating from the executive branch. Under normal circumstances, what should happen here?
Well, under normal circumstances, back when we knew our Constitution, we would never have tolerated it. The Founding Fathers designed the Constitution with enough checks and balances that you can keep all the branches under control. As a matter of fact, the Founding Fathers, the first impeachment you have of the Supreme Court justice was because the Supreme Court justice tried to make national policy from the court, Samuel Chase. Well, they would never have tolerated what the court has done in recent years with marriage or with anything else because they're making national policy. And so that's why they gave us 6 means in the Constitution of controlling the courts. Try to ask people today what one mean of controlling the courts is, and you won't get an answer. We just don't even know the Constitution anymore. In the last election, 70% of the citizens who voted did not know the Constitution was the supreme law of the land. So when you don't, and by the way, 62% of voters can't name the 3 branches of government, and 48% of elected officials can't name the 3 branches of government. Now, if you don't even know what the 3 branches of government are, you don't know how to do checks and balances. And the Founding Fathers gave us every tool we need to keep the people in charge, to keep the courts and the president under the people, not above the people. We just lost our knowledge of that. And that's, again, is why we do the Jefferson Lies, because he articulated those principles. If we get those principles back, we find out, hey, we don't have to let these other folks run the nation. I mean, we the people really are in charge here. And so that's why the Constitution is such a great document. If we ever still knew it, it'd be great.
Have we circumvented it to the point where it's irreparable?
No, we have not. We have not gotten there. You know, biblically, look how many times Israel really goofed it up and God brought them back from the brink time after time, and sometimes in very short order. In the case of where we are now, you look to 1976. You remember in 1976, America is finished. We're all going to have to learn to wear sweaters because the energy crisis, we are not going to be able to do energy. And you remember what was happening with so many areas. And we were telling Americans to prepare for the worst. The next election came around, and in two terms, one president, 2 terms, we are back to the world's leader. Countries all over the world chanting USA, USA, all over Eastern Europe, all over South America. USA was the leader again. We became constitutionally sound and strong. And you just go through cycles like that. That's what the book of Judges is about. You know, every generation forget and have to relearn. And we're at that point now where we've forgotten what we did even 40 years ago. We're having to relearn it. But no, we're not past the point of no return until the people decide, I don't want to go back anymore. I want something totally different. I don't want the old Constitution. I want it to be. And at that point, you get into what we have in the book of Judges. Every man did that which is right in his own eyes. And then you become a nation of anarchy. And that's the other option. And we shouldn't want to go there.
Let me say to our viewers and listeners, you got to go to wallbuilders.com, an incredible website. And David, you've seen him on all the shows. What an honor to have him with us today. Get the book entitled The Jefferson Lies, and you can pick it up at the bookstores, I'm sure. David, I got about 2.5 minutes left. You mentioned that Jefferson talked about Islam and terrorism. Clarify us what his stance was on that.
Yeah, his stance is real simple. Starting 1783, we finished the American Revolution. 1784, we're being attacked by 5 Muslim nations over in the same area, the Mediterranean and North Africa, and over throughout the same region we are now. Benghazi, that was called the nation of Tripoli back then, but you had all along there from Egypt over to the west coast of Africa being attacked by Muslim terrorists. And so in 1784, Congress sent 3 ambassadors to try to negotiate with them, and that was John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and Ben Franklin. After 2 years of trying to negotiate, Adams and Jefferson asked the Muslim ambassador they were dealing with, they said, we don't understand. America's never done anything against Muslims, ever at all. Why are you attacking us? It's all unprovoked. And the ambassador said, well, it's written in our Quran. Our Quran tells us we have to attack you. You're infidels. We have to enslave you, subjugate you. And if we get killed attacking you, we go to heaven. And it's like Adams and Jefferson go, no way. And they went and got Qurans and read the Quran. And they learned for the first time how the opposition thought. And so when Jefferson becomes president, he loads up the Navy and the Marines and sends them over there to extinguish that manner of thinking. At the end of that war, they came back and printed the first American Quran. It came out in 1806 at the end of the first 5-year war against terror. And in it, it begs Americans to read the Quran. And it says, reader, when thou read the Quran, you will wonder at the absurdities that infected the greatest part of the world. And it goes on to say, you're not going to believe what's in this Quran. You'll understand why they attack us once you read this. Well, they wanted everybody to know this is not a religion of peace, but today we don't want anybody to read the Quran. Just listen to what we say. This is a religion of peace. Jesus said, you judge a tree by its fruits. If it's a religion of peace, you would find the Muslim part of the world being very peaceful, very calm. It is not. It is the most on fire part of the world and has been for the last 1,000 years. So that's where Jefferson was, as you judge a tree by its fruits. He read their own books. He saw their behavior. He knew how to deal with it, and he did.
So beautifully said. Thank you, David, for your time. I know you are greatly wanted all over the country. Let me just say to our viewers and listeners, go to wallbuilders.com and then go to the bookstores and look for Jefferson Lies and get a copy of it and read it. More importantly, you may want to read it with your students in your household and have them read it as well. Thanks, David. Let's connect again down the road soon, okay?
Look forward to it. Thanks. God bless.
All right, God bless you. All right, again, wallbuilders.com, and the name of the book is called The Jefferson Lies. I think you must read this book and take it to heart, and then share it with your neighbors and friends as well. We'll see you next time on Focus Today.
I'm Paulina Leiser, producer of Focus Today. Thank you for watching this video, and make sure to check our other videos at thedove.us.